Okay, strap yourselves in because this one is a trip. Hi friends, welcome back to another episode of The Library is Open. You will notice once again that I am in my garden because I'm just trying to take advantage of the weather. This sort of like heat wave we're having in the UK at the moment. A lot of people sort of talking about how it's really, really like oppressively hot. I've not really found that. I don't know. Perhaps I'm just cold-blooded, like reptilian or something. Which is an interesting thought. um, but regardless, it is good to get out there and get the vitamin D and stuff and sit in nature a bit, albeit nature in pot plants, but still nature. So I decided to film yet another discussion episode outdoors. Is the conclusion. Keeping hydrated as well. Keep hydrated. That's important. Now, today I would like to talk about a book that I have read in practically a white heat. One of the reviews in the front of the book said, "You will read this all in one sitting," and while that's not quite true, I read it over 2 days. I did read a good 70% of it, I think, on the second day, because it sort of gathered a momentum and a speed where I just had to know what happened next, if that makes sense. So it's just like, Now I don't have a physical copy of this because I actually read it in the Kindle edition, so I can't show you it here, but you can also get a paperback version. I believe it's being republished because it was actually brought out I think a couple of years ago. I could be wrong on that, but no, it's being republished because the book has been turned into a Netflix series starring Jessie Buckley, which I believe is due to premiere on Netflix, UK and Ireland Netflix, I should say. On the, I think it's early September, but I will check the date and link it below. I should introduce the book. So the book I'm talking about today is by Iain Reid, and it's called I'm Thinking of Ending Things. And it's very much a sort of thriller, seat of your pants kind of book. I've been a little bit inspired by the lovely Kelly, who's one of my subscribers, and also a subscriber on Those Vegan Guys and the Vegan Queens, always linked below. And I would consider as well a friend. Although we haven't met in real life, we've had many back and forths on social media, and I know that she is a big fan of thrillers and so on and so forth, so this feels like a little bit of a tribute to her. Now, I've had to take notes on the plot of this in my trusty notebook, which, by the way, I love this. Somebody at work had one of these, so I had to go and get one, because it's the law. But just to keep the plot straight for, what happens, because, it sort of gathers a speed that you just kind of have to go with and keep up with, and if you lose one of the details, it's quite pertinent. But what I won't do is spoil the ending, because I think people should discover that for themselves, but I will take you up to the bit where we find the revelation. Okay, so our main character, who will be played by Jessie Buckley in the Netflix series, is unnamed in the book, and she sort of narrates the story throughout. So, right, here we go. Let me try and get my thoughts straight here, following my little timeline that I wrote in the book. So it starts off with the idea that she's thinking of ending things with her boyfriend, right? Who is he works in science, basically. He does something quite, intelligent with science-related things. Clearly, I didn't pay that much attention. And they're driving to meet his parents, who live sort of in the back of beyond. In the interim, we discover that she's been getting these creepy phone calls from this guy, a voice who always leaves the same message on her answering machine. And this message is always, there's just one question to answer. And the weird thing is that the phone calls are coming from her own phone number, which makes no sense at all. Anyway, she hasn't told anybody about this. So they're heading off to meet his parents for the first time on this farm, and she's not really sure about their relationship. She sort of goes into the backstory of how they met at a pub quiz and sort of hit it off, and now, but she's not sure like where they're going in terms of if she should just end the relationship. So they get to the parents' house, and they go around because the parents live on a farm, and there's all this sort of creepy imagery about animals that have died or been killed, so it's quite visceral and sort of, quite sensory. Made me feel a bit meh, but I'm not a fan of animal agriculture, obviously, so I suppose that's not exactly a shock. So they go to the house, and after dinner, which is a little bit stilted, like the mum is a little bit sort of off, not unfriendly or anything, but just sort of, there's something she can't quite put her finger on. And after dinner, Jake, that's the boyfriend, sort of disappears to look around the house. So she looks around the house, and she finds this basement where there's all these like creepy paintings of like a sort of long fingered person, entity, I don't know, and a child in every one of the paintings. There's like multiples of them. This is after she's been told not to go in the basement, by the way. She also finds a photograph of what her boyfriend says is him as a child, but as she's staring at it, she realises that it doesn't look like him, it looks like her, which is very creepy. And after the dinner, where there's a sort of approaching feeling of menace, they start to drive home, and on the way back, her boyfriend says, "Oh, let's stop off for something sweet, like dessert or something." So they go to a Dairy Queen, which is, I believe, a sort of like fast foody place in America. I'm not 100% sure, but they go in to get lemonade basically, and they're being served by this by two girls, and then another girl comes out to make their order, and she is, quite weird herself, and she sort of says to our protagonist, it's weird to have a protagonist without a name, because I have to keep saying our protagonist. She tells her, "I'm really scared for you," which, isn't then not quantified, and they just get back in the car, and they finish the drinks, and her boyfriend says we should put these in a proper recycling bin, recycle. So they end up driving to this school, which is apparently deserted, and he goes to get rid of the drinks, and to put them in a proper recycling bin. Anyway, he disappears and doesn't come back, so she ends up venturing into the school, where someone is clearly inside there, what she takes to be a janitor, and then she finds an old t-shirt that was she recognises as hers from when she was a child, and she finds that she's being pursued around the school, basically, presumably by this janitor, and she has to hide and to protect her own life. She then finds that she's been locked into the school, and it's a battle for survival. Or is it? That's as much as I can tell you about the book, because after that it just picks up speed like an express train, and suddenly you're like, what? One of those really great page turners where you just have to know. I experienced that with The Woman in the Window, which is another thriller that has also been turned into a film, but I think the release was paused because of the pandemic, so it hasn't been released yet, but I'm really looking forward to seeing that. This is a really, really creepy read. Although it comes under the category of thriller, it's almost horror, or psychological horror maybe, or literal horror. There's a sort of palpable sense of menace that just pervades the book, in very cleverly sort of contrasted with imagery that should be very sort of comforting. So you've got the home environment of the parents on this farm, which are you know, those are two environments that are set up as, you know, very sort of, well, homely and very sort of, you know, good old-fashioned, you know, familial warmth and so on and so forth, but there's a sort of icy edge to them. Similarly with something like the scene in the Dairy Queen, which is very creepy. There's something about that idea of like fluorescent lights and fast food that's supposed to look like, you know, everything that's bright and light and safe about you know, these sort of corporate entities, and but you know, it conjures pictures of this like fluorescent lighting. It's my brother there just going off. Have a good time. Bless him. I just did like a weird wave then, like, no, I'm filming. Yeah, this like fluorescent lighting that, you know, you sort of start picturing those sort of like flickering light bulbs and stuff like that, and then obviously the descriptions of the girls, and like the girl who tells her that she's scared for her is really evocative, but manages to do that in a really quite in quite sparse prose, because the prose in this one is very much it doesn't linger necessarily on description. It's more event to event to event to event to event, which is, you know, very typical of thrillers, and that's not a criticism because it actually works really well in maintaining the momentum and not lingering on superficial details, you know, and it's quite a skill to evoke a creepy kind of vibe without you know, spelling it out. Again, you know, and this might seem obvious, the thing with the school, you know, what we're taught to feel is like a sort of bastion of safety and, well, and, you know, education and help, community assistance is rendered into this sort of horrifying house of horrors. And that's a well-worn trope in horror and thriller as genres, but used very, very effectively here. Perhaps it's something as well about the depersonalisation of the narrator. Well, we never know her name, so, you know, there's a tendency to think of her as the victim. Not that I'm saying that people should be, you know, ultimately classified as victims, because she fights against this throughout. And then when the final revelation comes, which again I'm not going to spoil, it sort of makes sense of that while raising even more questions about the book. And there's a brilliant quote in the book, actually, that I think sort of typifies, or rather sums up what I'm trying to say here. And it says, something that disorients, that unsettles what's taken for granted, something that disturbs and disrupts reality, that's scary. And I think that's really true, and I think, you know, that's why I think some of the best horror and you know, evocative thrillers are based in the mundane and the everyday, because it's that sort of flip side of thinking you know something so well that when it sort of turns and becomes something else, that's ultimately scary, because it undermines everything you believe or perceive, perhaps is a better word, to be true, you know. When I got to the end of this one, I actually had to do a lot of thinking and a little bit of Googling as well for some ending spoilers, just to see if what I thought was, you know, where the author was going. Not that that matters, because, you know, whatever you take from a book is valid, but I sort of wanted to check if what I thought was what other people got from it, and it seemed to be. You know, because it's almost like, I suppose, like a crime novel, like a sort of Agatha Christie type vibe, where the rug's kind of pulled from under you, and you go, right. Which is something that The Woman in the Window did really well as well, but almost several times. If you've read The Woman in the Window, if you haven't, I really do recommend it. I can't remember the author at the moment, but I will link that in the description. That sort of layers it on, where there's rug pull, rug pull, rug pull, rug pull, and it creates this sort of sense of pervasive instability, I suppose. So you really start to pay attention to what's going on. This is a really quick read in terms of, actual length, and I think that's probably a good thing, because I'm not sure you can sustain that level of disorientation, or maintain that tension, because I think a lot of the tension comes from the unknown in this book, in terms of there aren't clear answers to everything. You have to kind of figure it out for yourself, but that's fine. We can be active listeners, or rather readers, within our reading experience. I often think that reading is at its best a collaboration between the reader and the writer, so they give 50%, you give 50%, which I also believe to be true of like performance, probably films as well, when they work really well. Like as an actor and an acting teacher, what I do is 50% of the experience, and the audience provide the rest, and somewhere in the middle, alchemy. Same here. So, I think that's very much a good thing, and a thing that keeps you sort of engaged with the material that you're reading, without being a sort of passive observer and acceptor of things, because you really do have to think. So yeah, I really, really do recommend this if you're into smart thrillers and you're not too worried about having all the loose ends tied up for you. Then I definitely recommend this. As I say, it's a very quick read, so it's low commitment, and it will keep you scrolling those pages. I wish I had a physical copy, actually, because I'd love to notate like my favourite passages and stuff, because there are some very clever things. But again, the actual writing, the prose, is not necessarily what's happening here that's to savour, in terms of the turns of phrase and stuff, because it's very colloquially written. But again, that's no bad thing, if the prose achieves what the writer intends, then it's done its job, hasn't it? Not everything has to be James Joyce. Thank goodness, because there aren't enough hours in the day. No diss to James Joyce, but, they're long. So, Iain Reid has just released another one, I believe, called Foe, which I am quite eager... Well, not just released, I think it's in paperback now. But I shall probably be picking that up at some point, either on my Kindle app or on or a physical copy if I can get a second-hand one. Or I may use my Waterstones card, because I think I've got a lot of stamps on. If you do use Waterstones regularly, by the way, that's a really good point. Definitely get a Waterstones Plus card, because when you get 10 stamps, you get like £10 credit to use, either in-store or online. So it's definitely worth it, particularly if you buy a lot of books. So yeah, so that's my thoughts on I'm thinking of ending things. I would love to know if any of you have read this, or if you're intending to watch the Netflix series. I'm going to be watching the series really, really carefully to see what changes they've made. I mean, it's fine if they make changes, obviously they're different mediums, but I would just be interested to see how they do this story, particularly the denouement, because while that worked quite easily in the book, I suppose, it'll be interesting to see what they do visually with it, and how they create that palpable sense of menace and unease that runs throughout the book. So that's my thoughts on that. Oh, and I also really like Jessie Buckley. I think she's a great actor. So there we go. Looking forward to that one. Alright, my darlings, Kelly, I hope you enjoyed this, specifically as a thriller fan, and I'm sure there are others of you out there as well who are thriller fans. Do let me know, what are some good sort of thrillers that you've read, because I'm really kind of enjoying that genre at the moment. I would like to thank you, as always, for engaging with this channel. It really, really is nice to read your comments, and to, have this sort of almost live but at one removed discussion between us. It's a bit like having a book club, isn't it, but online. So I quite enjoy that. Alright, my lovelies, you take care of yourselves. Remember to stay hydrated. Keep turning those pages. Put your library card somewhere safe, because you never know when you'll need it. And do look after yourselves. If you're going out, stay safe, stay distant, wear a mask if and when you can, because it's really important. Lots of love to you all. The library is now officially closed, and I'm going to go enjoy the rest of this weather. Alright, Take care of yourselves. Mwah.